Welcome to this edition of World Crisis Radio. This is Webster Tarpley speaking to you from Washington, D.C., and this is our Christmas program. And we're wishing season's greetings to everybody out there celebrating Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, and any and all other festivities. And we wish you all the best. And it's better to celebrate something than to celebrate nothing. So we are now in the midst of a kind of a flap, an international exchange of rocket rattling. Rocket rattling. Remember, it used to be saber rattling up until the Second World War, but after that, it became a process of rocket rattling, and that's what we've got. And, we've got an exchange, what could be considered greetings or pleasantries, or maybe not, going across, and We'll see where this ends up. So let's try to catch up, right? Because it's been moving very fast, especially on the eve of a holiday. So it starts with the president-elect, and in the past, 24 hours, he's been doing a lot of tweeting. Now, even before this, we have to note that the initial impulse for this entire saga seems to have started with Russian President Putin, who talked about, often, from time to time, certainly does, about the Russian nuclear capability and Russian deterrence. And if you notice, President Putin always tends to put this in terms of the ability of Russia to foil anti-missile defenses. And it's often done with reference to the possibility, or in fact, the reality of the U.S. putting anti-ballistic missile defenses, ABM defenses, into Eastern Europe, right? With the explanation that these are not directed against the Russian Federation, but they are directed against Iran. And this is ABM. The ABM treaty, of course, which was, I think, a very helpful thing, no longer exists because it was denounced. It was terminated by the Bush administration about 10 years ago or more, an unfortunate event. So what Putin is always talking about is the ability of Russian missiles to foil, to escape, to defeat the various missile defenses that might be put up. And he combines that with then putting short-range and medium-range ballistic missiles into places like the Kaliningrad exclave of Russia, right? A piece of Russia which is separated from the main body of the Russian Federation by Poland and Lithuania up there in the Baltic. So that was the first step. The president-elect was already tweeting about the Lockheed Martin F-35. Based on the tremendous cost and cost overruns of the Lockheed Martin F-35, I have asked Boeing to price out a comparable F-18 Super Hornet. Well, the trick with these combat aircraft, fighter planes, is that if you want to have air superiority, you've got to invest in air superiority. And once you don't have air superiority, then by golly, all kinds of things can happen. So I think this is a problem which it really merits a great deal of careful study, and you'd want to have a pretty exhaustive interagency process so that you think of all the angles on this. I don't think this is an open and shut case in any sense. And the F-35 would provide very significant advantages. Then we got the first of the tweets that really made shattering news, and that was the one about greatly strengthening and expanding the U.S. nuclear capability. All right, the U.S. nuclear capability. Here it goes. The United States must greatly strengthen and expand its nuclear capability, says the president-elect. Now, let me just point out, we have a treaty with the Russian Federation. It is called New START. Now, this is a series that goes back to the 1970s, right? We had Strategic Arms Limitation Talks, SALT, SALT 1, SALT 2. I think we got up to SALT 3. After that, we got START. This was in the early 1980s with Al Haig, I guess, started this up. The Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty. So you go from limitation to reduction, and there are suitable Russian acronyms for these things, right, corresponding. And then, after a number of phases of this, we've got this question of the New START Treaty. The New START Treaty was signed in 2010, ratified by the U.S. and Russia, and went into force on the 5th of February 2011. And it is a treaty which is going to go on for at least 10 years. Now, this treaty establishes limits which are legally binding. So, let's see. We probably ought to just give a quick sketch of this. As you can find, readily on the internet, Wikipedia. The total number of deployed warheads could exceed the 15. Well, first of all, let's rather than the exceptions, let's do the rules. The summary of the limits under New START are, for the two countries, right, U.S. and Russia, deployed missiles and bombers, 700. There's a separate category, deployed warheads, that is to say, reentry vehicles, multiple reentry vehicles put on single missiles, and bombers. And this is 1550. And the 1550 is then also supplemented by deployed and non-deployed launchers, that is to say, missile launchers and other vectors. So missile tubes and bombers. So that is the treaty. Now that is binding. You can't say that you're going to expand and strengthen your nuclear capabilities beyond that. All right. So that, I think, and that, of course, that has caused shockwaves around the world by itself already, the idea that you're going to expand and strengthen, because the general idea of U.S. policy has generally tended to be that you want to limit, you want to tone down the reliance on nuclear weapons. Now, in response to this, and actually rather quickly, we have this letter from Putin to the president-elect. And here's where he says, we'll give this when we come back here in just a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio, and happy holidays to all. We're following the rocket rattling, which has gone around the world a few times. This is unfortunate and hopefully can be contained, but that will take some effort. So the president-elect had written at about noon yesterday, The United States must greatly strengthen and expand its nuclear capability until such time as the world comes to its senses. Now, the New York Times gives a series of interpretations, right? Because this could mean many things. And again, there is this New START treaty with the approximately 1550 warheads, and for the U.S. that level's got to be reached in 2018. So initially, at least, the U.S. would be in a process of reducing warheads from the present 1,800 approximately to about 1,550 in 2018. So what is the strengthen and expand at that point? Now, we also have the letter. Here's the letter now, which came rather quickly after that tweet that we just heard about the strengthen and expand. Now, this is dated earlier, I guess, but here's what it is. This is from Putin in the Kremlin to Trump, right? So Putin, the president of the Russian Federation, Moscow, Kremlin. So he writes, "Dear Mr. Trump, please accept my warmest Christmas and New Year's greetings. Serious global and regional challenges, which our countries have to face in recent years, show that relations between Russia and the United States remain an important factor in ensuring stability and security in the modern world. I hope that after you assume the position of President of the United States of America, I hope that we will be able, by acting in a constructive and pragmatic manner, to take real steps to restore the framework of bilateral cooperation in different areas, as well as bring our level of collaboration on the international scene to a qualitatively new level. Please accept my sincere wishes to you and your family for sound health, happiness, well-being, success, and all the rest." Now, that is, I think, it's a pretty standard sort of greeting. It may be more elaborate than these things are sometimes when they are exchanged. But now the other piece of background that we need is the off-the-air conversation between the president-elect, apparently, and Mika Brzezinski. And this is the Morning Joe program on MSNBC. So the president-elect, elaborating on the strengthen and expand nuclear capability message, said, "Let it be an arms race. We will outmatch them at every pass and outlast them all." Now, this is now the second shock heard around the world, and has caused concern, I think, in some places consternation. And obviously the arms control community is not happy with this. And this also then it mixes in with the yearly press conference given by Russian President Putin. It's a very large press conference, goes on for 3 or 4 hours, and the world press is certainly there, and moderated by Dmitry Peskov. Some Russians had been saying in the last couple of days that U.S.-Russian relations could not be worse. And as I've tried to point out, I think there's a strong element of, let's say, dramaturgy in this. In other words, the idea that these relations are at an absolute nadir, that all the dialogue channels are frozen. I think this is an exaggeration. I think this is a desire to lend a kind of dramatic framework to the change of administrations here. In other words, to stress how bad things are now with Obama and the residue of Hillary, and then you'll have the opportunity to say how much better it is under the incoming administration. Let me quote here from the National Public Radio correspondent. Putin took a deep dive into U.S. politics on Friday during his annual news conference, praising the president-elect and skewering Obama and Hillary Clinton. During this marathon question and answer session that lasted almost 4 hours, reporters kept returning to the accusations of Kremlin interference in the U.S. presidential election. Putin took them on with gusto, at times sounding like a Trump surrogate, writes the National Public Radio correspondent. So Putin says, the current administration and the Democratic Party leadership are trying to blame all their failures on external factors. The Russian president says that he agrees with the incoming president that in the White House that anybody, even someone lying on their sofa, could have hacked the Democratic National Committee. The most important thing, according to Putin, is the information that came out of the hack, namely the machinations among top Democrats. America's ruling party, says, has clearly forgotten the original meaning of the word democratic. And it goes on. Putin commenting on the election, he went all the way, even though only we believed that he would win. Now, this is a partisan tone. This is a mindset which, as you can see, is deeply inserted into the U.S. political context. And I would say probably not seemly for a foreign head of state to grapple quite so much with the partisan details. And it opens up some problems perhaps in the future. Back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Reminding you now, last-minute holiday gifts. Well, go to americansystem.tv, americansystem.tv. And with that, you get the Monday through Thursday 1-hour program of news, commentary, philosophical, historical background, as much depth and breadth, of course, as we can give it. So the costs are minimal, right? It's about the cost of one trip to Starbucks for, in some cases, one person, or a very modest fee. If you want to invest a little bit more, you can support the activism that that we carry out on the program, in which we hope to promote in the coming months and years. So that's American System TV, americansystem.tv. Now, here's the problem with Putin, I think, and I would point this out to him, because this is not wise. First of all, it's not wise to be seen as, let's say, obtruding oneself quite so much into the politics of another country, right? Putin took great exception to this, right? So the Color Revolution people tried to say that he was not popular, right? There was one called the Levada Center. The Levada Center put out a poll saying that the Putin party is not as popular as it says, and at that point the Levada Center suddenly was labeled as a foreign agent. Well, whether they're a foreign agent or not, I don't know, but there is a problem here, and here's where I think it actually is located. Putin says, look, it's true that the hack of the Democratic National Committee could have been done by someone on a couch, the 400-pound person that has now become a a legend, right? That is a meme, by the way. The 400-pound guy sitting on his bed and trying to do the hacking. Putin says the only thing that counts is the information true? Is the information true? Well, I not assume that the information is 1,000% vetted. In other words, it has not been checked. Partly because the interest of the Democratic Party and the Hillary campaign was not to talk about this, but not give it more importance by making it a great topic of discussion. Right? The idea was to get that off the front page, keep it off the front page. If there's nothing much in it, which was often the case, then keep it off the front page. As a matter of fact, those are so empty that we have the fake news people come along, right? The real masters of free association and the complete invention. But so Putin says, was it true? Like the idea is the content is everything. But wait a minute. Then he goes on to say, does it really matter how it happened? Right? What difference does it, we might say, to coin a phrase. Does it really matter? What does it matter? The problem with that is that the hack is a crime. You're violating the public laws of a country. And to opine as a foreign head of state that you don't care whether a certain country's laws are violated or not, this is verging on an unfriendly act. And I would not recommend this. Now, here's the other thing. If the crime means nothing, hacking into the Democratic National Committee and all the rest of us, then the great rule, I've always said, the great rule of international affairs is reciprocity. You do it to them, they'll do it to you. It never fails. This has been the case, right? Again and again and again. So I really wonder if something like this were done in Russia, would President Putin sit back and say, well, boys, it doesn't really matter. The important thing is that the content is true, and the way that it was obtained and the way that it was circulated and so forth means absolutely nothing. I don't think that would be his response. I think his response would be quite different. I think he would have a response of indignation and anger, and he would be justified because you don't intelligence agencies or criminal hackers or others to be able to procure such information and cause chaos, because the net effect of this cyber war exchange could very well turn out to be an increase of the level of chaos in the world. In other words, the destabilization of both countries in this case. I think it's worth avoiding that. And I really don't think that resentment or anger or anything of the kind is a good guide in these things. I think statesmanship does not include that. And now the gusto of intervening has to be restrained. I would also point to the fact that we're told that in the first moments when the expand Twitter came out, right, when the president-elect shot off the first one of these, right, that you've got to expand and improve the U.S. Nuclear deterrence. I think at that point the Kremlin was there was originally a certain amount of shock. There was a certain amount of dismay, because the idea was that Trump was supposed to be a candidate of a different type. And I guess that calmed down. What we do see in the press conference by Putin is that he keeps saying, don't worry about it. This is nothing new. This is there's nothing out of the ordinary here. says Putin. He says that the U.S. president-elect has advocated a stronger military throughout his election campaign. Okay. And then there's yet another round in this thing, right? There's another response. And, well, it's this question of the alternate path. Let's see if we can find this. The alternate path. And we're going to find it. Anyway, what he says is he praises the Putin letter. He says the Putin letter is great. It's excellent. And I hope that we can live like this. Here we go. Putin says in response, Putin's thoughts are so correct. And the president-elect hopes that, quote, both sides are able to live up to these thoughts, and we do not have to travel an alternate path. Let me repeat that one. The thoughts are so correct, right? These goodwill sentiments and congratulations and best wishes and so forth. But he hopes that, quote, both sides are able to live up to these thoughts, and we do not have to travel an alternate path. The alternate path. What is the alternate path? I'm just watching CNN and a couple of other news channels. The CNN commentator said that he could detect an element of threat in the traveling an alternate path segment. So here's where we are. Merry Christmas to all. We'll be back in a minute with Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. So we've had now a process, nuclear disarmament, right? Nuclear disarmament. I can look back, for example, to the Eisenhower administration. And at a certain point, Eisenhower called in at that point, a rather well-known Republican political figure. This was Harold Stassen, who was a Republican. I believe had been the governor of Minnesota, but he was out of office, and this was the guy who ran for president virtually every time, right? Stassen used to say, most men my age spend their time playing golf. I have better things to do. I'm going to run for president. So a feisty and spirited guy. In the 1950s, Eisenhower said, Stassen, you should now become the arms control czar. You should become the arms control and arms limitation czar. You should centralize all that in your post, right? He made him, a special advisor in the White House. And I remember a cartoon where there was Stassen and there was this huge lion who was roaring, and the observer says, John Q. Public says, I understand you're supposed to pull that lion's teeth. And the teeth this was the arms race. The arms race, not a good thing. And all of this stuff is complicated up to a point, right? There are some elements that are simple. You don't need to be fooled by obscurantism. But still, a lot of it is complex, and a lot of it is not what it seems on the surface. So therefore, I would recommend an extremely cautious and well-prepared approach, that any statements about this are going to be interpreted by governments all over the world. Right? China is listening, right? Europe is listening, and you can do a tremendous amount of harm just by some ill remarks. So this is all quite a surprise, right? This has come virtually out of nowhere, and I would remind our Russian friends, because we're trying to work for good relations with Russia, right? We would like, in particular, to start that with some meaningful cooperation in Syria, and we could then take it from there. But the idea of scheming, intrigue, of having so many, right? You turn on Russia Today, RT, lots and lots of opinions about U.S. politics, right? About Russian politics, very little. Oh, and they had, we'll get to them again later, right? There's also an attempt to kind of hype certain problems that have appeared here in the West, right? And there are themes, for example, in Putin's press conference that I think would bear a little bit more scrutiny. For example, he actually says that the Russian health system is not what it should be, right? And it would be important to have a modern hospital in, I guess, the Crimea and related areas, right? Yes, sure. So there are problems, right, in line with our holiday season kind of stress on welfare and the social safety net. Okay, so a lot more to be said about that, and that will be coming up. We got to see whether this is just a passing squall or whether it's something more serious building up. There's also the escape clause that this is still the president-elect, not the president. So there may be some chance that the point of view can be refined. We certainly hope so. Now, here's the other one. At the United Nations, a resolution originally sponsored by Egypt, I believe, but then having other co-sponsors, and at a certain point, Egypt dropped out. They said they would no longer sponsor the resolution, but it looks like other countries have come forward. So here it is. U.S. abstains as UN Security Council votes to condemn Israeli settlements. This is today, December 23rd, 2016. So defying extraordinary pressure from the president-elect and furious lobbying by Israel, the Obama administration on Friday allowed the United Nations Security Council to adopt a resolution that condemned Israeli settlement construction. The administration's decision not to veto the measure broke a long-standing American policy of serving as Israel's sturdiest diplomatic shield at the United Nations. Now, this is something that it's not immediately translatable into action on the ground, but there were 15 members of the Security Council, and the resolution passed 14-0 with the United States abstaining. And what had happened was that Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel had called the president-elect and urged that this be vetoed. But other countries came in, right? In other words, when President Sisi of Egypt said maybe this is too much to do at this point, we have 4 non-permanent members of the Security Council: Malaysia, New Zealand, Senegal, and Venezuela. These are temporary members, right? They don't have the veto, right? They can't do all those things. They said essentially, if Egypt is faltering, we will proceed to put this up. And then it got the 14-0 vote. Now, this is complicated. From the point of view of international law, settlements that are constructed on occupied Palestinian territory are illegal. They're illegal. But the other side of the coin is when these high-powered resolutions have come into the Security Council, the United States has often vetoed them. I think up to now, always, generally, vetoed them. So this is a kind of a turning point. Now, there's going to be a lot of consternation. A lot of the interested parties here are going to be very upset. I would just point out, under Obama, the United States has signed with Israel a landmark foreign aid package, which goes on for years, and it's, I think, reasonably generous. In other words, it provides many billions of dollars of aid, and it establishes Obama in many ways as the greatest benefactor of Israel, if that's the the measure that's being used. But, of course, perception is everything, right? As Bishop Berkeley said, esse est percepi. That was his theory. The theory, of course, is wrong, but it goes up to a certain point. It can be true. So this has now gone down. The departing Obama administration has been highly critical, says the New York Times, of Israel's settlement building, describing it as an impediment to a two-state solution, which it certainly is. But the president-elect made clear that he has a far more sympathetic approach to Israel and will start acting on that on the 20th of January. Now, sure to make everything worse. Sure to make everything worse. Samantha Power. And again, count your blessings. She's not going to be Secretary of State. The U.S. ambassador at the United Nations, Samantha Power, portrayed the abstention as consistent with the American disapproval of the settlement building, but she also criticized countries at the United Nations for treating Israel unfairly. She said the United States remained committed to its steadfast support for Israel and reminded the Council that Israel received an enormous amount of American military aid. Well, nobody's gonna forget that, and indeed that is that multi-year accord. So that's the news from the UN today. Welcome to the second hour of World Crisis Radio. Webster Tarpley here in Washington, D.C., and glad to have you on board for the Christmas program. I'm afraid we haven't been very Christmassy up to now, but the world is what it is, right? As Pirandello once said, right? The world is what it is. So we have to pay attention. Now, I want to delve a little bit into this question of the Berlin Christmas market, right? This touches me because I know that area so well, right? That the Kaiser Wilhelm Memorial Church, as I think I've said, maybe not on this broadcast, but on 9/11, I was in Berlin, right? September 11th, 2001. There I was in Berlin. I had just given my speech at the International Leibniz Conference at the Technical University. And 9/11 hit. We found out about it what was late in the afternoon there. So all kinds of things went on, right? I stopped by the Berlin Cathedral, right? The Berliner Dome, right? In the island in the Spree River. And, talked to the to one of the people there. And then it turned out that at the Kaiser Wilhelm Memorial Church, there was an all-night service going on. So I thought it would be interesting as a reporter and also, from human point of view to go and see what it was. So there was the Lutheran church, right, in that blue octagonal building, right? Because the old church is a ruin, but then modern buildings have been put up there. And that's, I guess, the first time I saw them was in 1967. And the Kurfürstendamm, which ends at that place, that was the sort of Fifth Avenue or, fashionable street of the Cold War Berlin, right? Because the center of Berlin is really in East Berlin. But during the Cold War, they built up that part of West Berlin as an alternative center. And it was a very interesting place. So the idea of that kind of crime taking place in a town one knows so well and in a part of town, we have to look into it. Now, my thesis is growing day by day. This is a false flag. This is fake terrorism. This is something which cannot be explained by ineptitude or bungling or something like that. It looks increasingly like there's a concrete desire to have something bad, really bad, happen with the design of using that against Merkel. Now, this kind of an analysis doesn't depend on the political qualities of Merkel, good, bad, indifferent. It doesn't matter. If there's a false flag that has this capability, you want to know about it, and you want to know about it because Germany is the most important country in Europe, right? That's always been the case. And it's also one of the few islands of stability. In other words, the Merkel government right now, I think still remains one of the only kinds of governments in Europe which is actually stable, right? The British, they have Brexit. The French, Hollande has collapsed. In France, Renzi is out. A new guy in, Gentiloni. No, I'm sorry, not Gentiloni, but a new prime minister. And so therefore, Merkel, right? And all we're looking for is stability, not chaos, but stability. And the modern state is proving vulnerable to all kinds of, what can we call it? Hybrid warfare, color revolutions, sure, of all types. So what's going on here? Now, the news overnight is that the alleged killer, right, this guy Amri from Tunisia, has been killed. And he's been killed in northern Italy, not just northern Italy, in a suburb of Milan, practically in the city of Milan. This is a place called Sesto San Giovanni. Sesto San Giovanni is like the end of the line on one of the main lines of the Milan subway, right? Metropolitana Milanese can take you to Sesto San Giovanni. And then there are other trains that go even beyond that. But Sesto San Giovanni, it's kind of to the northwest of Milan. Northeast, not very far. It's on the way to Monza. Monza is where the, Italian Grand Prix and all kinds of other things go on. Sesto San Giovanni was an industrial town. They had the Breda, right? The factory that built the Washington subway system, at least the cars, the oldest cars, the 1000 series. That's the Breda Finmeccanica or the Breda Meccanica. That's located in Sesto San Giovanni. And in order to get to Sesto San Giovanni, you've got to go to Milan, probably the main terminal, right? Milano Centrale. And from there you can take the subway, or there are other ways to get there. So the story is that Amri was walking on the street in Sesto San Giovanni, and that he came up to two cops, and he had a backpack. So the two cops, seeing this guy come out of the station, they said, "We have to check your backpack." And he pulled out a .22 caliber pistol, shot one cop, winged him, right, got him in the shoulder, and the other cop then killed Amri. Now, let's just go through some of this stuff. We are told now that the search was hindered by the fact that the very thorough and usually very competent and very reliable German police did not find the identification papers of Amri in the truck until 48 hours after the killings at the Berlin Christmas market were done. So that meant that Amri had a 48-hour jump. He had a 48-hour time advantage compared to the dragnet that was then going to come after him. And again, this is just, it's crazy. Amri is supposed to have been, tarrying in Germany because they wanted to deport him. They had denied him asylum, said, "You get out of here, you're getting deported." But they couldn't do it because they didn't have a passport for him. So they had to go through the process, or he did, of applying for the passport, getting that sent to Berlin, and then he was going to be kicked out of Germany. Now, it's beyond belief. It beggars the imagination that this stuff could be so impossible. Notice also that the German police, for some reason, got hung up on this Pakistani, and the Pakistani turned out to have apparently nothing to do with it. Right? That was the final finding. Remember that Amri got control of this truck by essentially hijacking it. The driver. I don't know. Did he kill the driver? Anyway, the point was he had this .22, and he got control of the Polish licensed truck and neutralized somehow or other the Polish truck driver. Now, here's the other thing, though, that Amri is an ex-convict with a criminal record who had been in jail. So he comes from Midwest central Tunisia. He has a reputation for drinking, and it means alcohol, partying, and playing music. So he is secularized. But in March of 2011, Amri decides to make the plunge into the Mediterranean, cross the Mediterranean, and get over to Italy. He was convicted in absentia by a Tunisian court for stealing a car and was sentenced to 5 years in prison. Now, that should have been an Interpol warrant right there, but apparently not. Back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. Remember, if you want to get yourself a gift, go to americansystem.tv, americansystem.tv, and you'll get our program from Monday through Thursday, 1 hour each evening. And I think the pace of world events, right, the Zeitgeist, the Weltgeist is accelerating. So please keep up with it and let me help you do that. All right, so Amri gets out of Tunisia just in time to escape a 5-year jail sentence for stealing a car. Now, when he crosses the Mediterranean, he gets to the island. He doesn't even get all the way across. He gets to Lampedusa. Lampedusa. This is one you've seen on TV, right? The Pope visited it a little while ago, right, to show solidarity with these immigrants. But 4th of April, 2011, Amri gets to Lampedusa on this rather shaky seacraft that he's got. Now, he then goes to Bel Passo, Catania. So Catania is the east coast of Sicily, right? It's, from Messina on the north east. Then you have Catania, the north center, and then Syracuse, right? Syracuse, the lower, the southeastern part. So what does he do when he gets there? He's guilty of arson. He burns down the entire facility. He's arrested in Bel Passo. He gets 4 years in prison for arson, for causing a fire, damaging property, making threats. This according to the Italian Justice Ministry in the New York Times. Local news outlets report that 3 Tunisian asylum seekers, including the 19-year-old with the initials AA, Amri, were arrested for setting fire to the center where they were being sheltered to protest poor living conditions and delays in the processing of their asylum claims. And then he spends 4 years in 6 prisons. Now, I recommend La Stampa of Turin. They give you the itinerary. So he's in Bel Passo in April of 2011. Then he's going to be in Catania. Now he's arrested because of burning the center in Bel Passo. He's then shipped off to Enna, elsewhere in Sicily, and he's got all kinds of charges for him, and he's also got disciplinary measures inside the prison system. That's June 2012. Then on to Sciacca, another place in Sicily. He's in this is now December 2013. He's in the Sciacca prison. Then he ends up in Agrigento, another Italian prison. So he's under special surveillance, uno speciale monitoraggio, special surveillance. Then Palermo, the prison in Palermo, September 2014. Then a different prison in Palermo for serious reasons of security. In other words, he's a very dangerous character. Then Caltanissetta, again, another Italian prison, This is May of 2015. Finally gets to Berlin, and and then the next part is, as of the time that he has committed this crime, he's on the run. But even before that, he, as one account puts it, he bounced around Germany, North Rhine-Westphalia, Düsseldorf, places like this, right? Wuppertal, Duisburg, Mönchengladbach. He's always going back and forth between Berlin and North Rhine-Westphalia, right? As many people may still know it. So he's living in Berlin, and then the police have a file on him as of March 2016. They've got a file on him, and they think that he's involved in drug dealings at the Görlitzer Park. He gets into a fight with another dealer, and he's ordered to be deported. Right? He wants asylum as of April 2016. June 2016, he's ordered to be deported. He's detained in Switzerland in July of 2016, just in this kind of a spot check. And he's held for 48 hours in a jail. Then he's released. And then he comes into contact. Now, here, let's just go through this. He's in contact with an ISIS recruiter. And this guy's name is Abu Wallah, a Salafist preacher, known as the man without a face. He never faces the camera when delivering video sermons. According to the Washington Post, authorities knew that Amri had interacted with Abu Wallah, the 32-year-old of Iraqi descent, arrested in November on charges of recruiting and sending fighters from Germany to the Islamic State. So he's part of a conduit, right, of a delivery system. Key evidence in Wallah's case came from an Islamic State, Daesh, defector who had returned to Germany and accused Wallah of helping to recruit him and arranged his travel to Syria. So this person, again, arrested in Italy, arrested in Switzerland, but still somehow not possible. And now the capper is that after killing 12 people and wounding a good number, he somehow gets to Chambéry. Now, Chambéry, if you look at the map, look at the French-Italian border on the Mediterranean, and you go up, you start from Monaco or someplace like this, you get up to Grenoble, and you get up to Lyon. So sort of in that same area as Lyon and Grenoble, there's Chambéry, right? It's Savoy. This was Savoy. And there he is. How did he do it? Did he cross the border into France? If so, France is under a state of emergency, right? The cops can frisk you anytime they want. What's going on? And again, we would now ask Prime Minister Cazeneuve to enlighten us, right? The guy who he declared a state of emergency after Charlie Hebdo at the beginning of 2014, and then within a few months, then we have the Nice attacks, right? So that somehow the state of emergency doesn't mean anything. And then that got our friend Amri from Chambéry to Turin, right? Torino. How does he do it? And then from Turin to Milan at the station, and then finally Sesto San Giovanni. Back in a minute on World Crisis Radio. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio. So you get the idea. Amri goes where he wants, even with Lawrence. And very important is what's in Sesto San Giovanni? Why there? It looks like this might be comparable to those little places in Belgium, which have sort of lost their economic vitality. Sesto San Giovanni used to be industrialized, right? As I said, it used to have the Breda. It used to have other important industries, and that all collapsed, and now they're trying to limp along with this, rubble service economy, right? The junkyard of the post-industrial world. So why is he going there? It's understood that the Italian authorities are now essentially putting the resources they have into, checking out what is it that he thought he'd find in Sesto San Giovanni. Is there a safe house there? Whatever is it? So, again, La Stampa, important because they're scared, right? He came through their town, and therefore they give you this fairly detailed story, right? So the Berlin killer is dead in a suburb of Milan. And I have to call attention to this, right, that there's so much irregularity here. Looking at the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, right, the main conservative paper in Germany. We don't need to go through it, but there are all kinds of people now calling for increased scrutiny, right? It's clear that the Merkel government is going to come forward with new measures, right? They're going to ask for, I suspect, more use of these closed-circuit television cameras and related things. But I'm going to be very interested. I know people who yell false flag every time the sun comes up, right? They just that's their default reaction, right? Whatever it is, false flag. And I'm saying this really is a false flag. This is so suspicious that it cries out to any serious observer. So the VAZ, right, the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, is full of stories about how security measures are going to be increased and so forth. And I think one of the things you have to do is look at these networks, right? Because it is here we go. The Nach der Fahndung viele Fragen. So after the dragnet, there are lots of questions. Yes, I dare say they are. After the death of the suspected perpetrator of Berlin, many people are breathing easier, but the investigation is going further and on. What was the path that Anis Amri took towards Italy? That's only one of the unanswered questions, right there, as we've just gone through. There are a million. The thing is a total chaos. And again, last word on this. The cui bono, who benefits? Cui bono, the enemies of Merkel. It's clear. So who are they, and how might they have have helped along the results that we have? All right, now I guess the world is what it is. How about changing gears and thinking about the season and maybe about the weather and winter and a little bit of cultural background. Now, on the other program all week, we've been doing a kind of analysis of the economics, the economic implications of A Christmas Carol by Dickens, because The Christmas Carol by Dickens is a big attack on Malthusianism, right? The surplus population, as Scrooge always says, right? If you're going to die, you better die and decrease the surplus population until it turns out that he might be one of the surplus population. And it's also a big attack on what we would call liberal economics. And in those days, it was the classic British school, right? Ricardo, James Mill, people like this. So, but also the poor law, the prisons, the workhouses, the treadmill, and all these other things that were going on in Britain around 1844. So Dickens was aware of investigations into, for example, children working in the tin mines of Cornwall, the sort of southwest part of England, or Cornwall, and he was also worried. He had actually been to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He had seen child labor in the United States, in the New World, on one of his lecture tours. So there had been parliamentary investigations. Dickens wanted to do something to try to call attention to the plight of the poor man's child in particular. So he first thought about writing political polemics, statistical studies, and other things. And then he decided to abandon that approach and instead do what amounts to an emotional appeal. And that emotional appeal is contained in this Christmas Carol. Now, I know a lot of you people think that's just maudlin sentimentality, but I would beg to differ. I think that has had a positive effect on Anglo-American civilization. Dickens is not somebody who's going to give you answers, right? Because his answer is the Deus ex machina, right? That the three spirits come and fix you up. It can't be that. That is not a practical proposal. But at the very least, Dickens is able to identify problems that a lot of people denied, right? And there are inputs into this. For example, Washington Irving, the author of the Rip Van Winkle saga and the Legend of Sleepy Hollow. That's in a book of sketches by our dear friend Washington Irving in New York City in the 1810, 1820, and so forth. And there's stuff in there about people essentially. It's a study of English Christmas customs, and in one of Dickens' earlier books, he's got a guy there he's a sexton in a church, and he's visited by a bunch of goblins who show him the past and the future. So anyway, the Republican members of the House of Representatives, starting with somebody like Ryan and McCarthy, those guys should be made to sit in a room and read the Christmas Carol because it's meant for them. And I recommend that people take a look at the Alistair Sim version. Alistair Sim, a really great Scottish actor. This goes back to 1951. You can see it on YouTube, right? You put in Alistair Sim, Christmas Carol, Scrooge. You're going to find it there. It looks like a decent version of the film. There are other versions, right? Some people like the Gene Lockhart one. Some prefer the George C. Scott. There's another one with Bill Murray where Scrooge is a television executive. There's one where it's Scrooge becomes a black woman who has she's got a singing group and she's dumped her two friends, and she gives her assistant a hard time, and on and on. So take a look. And one of the things you're going to see in it is this question of charity. We'll get back to that in just a second. Charity, faith, hope, and charity. Back to World Crisis Radio. We're getting to the end of our Christmas broadcast here for 2016. Do take a look at that, those movie versions, and the Alistair Sim one, 1951 British version of the Christmas Carol. And what you'll see is that when you hear quotations from the Bible being read, it goes back to St. Paul's letter to the Corinthians. The famous one, though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels and have not charity, I am nothing. And then at the end of it, there now remain faith, hope, and charity, these three, but charity is the greatest among them. Lots to be said about that, but you can see the idea that the constant stress on charity is that Scrooge doesn't have it, and the money-changing world of the London stock market doesn't have it. Whereas coal miners that labor in the bowels of the earth, people who are taking care of lighthouses, people who are out in ships on the sea, and all kinds of people in homeless shelters and so forth, they have some Christmas spirit, even though they have so little or virtually nothing. They're destitute. So take a look at that. What Dickens is aiming at is the synthesis of religious elements and secular elements designed to promote what? Humanitarianism, charity, the negation of brutality, greed, and exploitation, and stripping people of their really hard-fought social safety net and related rights. Now, on the season, Thomas Sackville, and that is the Earl of Dorset. So now we're back to 1565. This guy is the co-author, Sackville, the first tragedy written in blank verse in the English language is Sackville. And he's also a guy who is reportedly in this reign of terror that Elizabeth I had with her secret police trying to catch Catholics and torment them. Sackville was thought to be one of the people who tried to mitigate that policy and to try to blunt it. But anyway, here's the famous study, The Mirror for Magistrates. Right? This is a bunch of narrative poems. This is said to be the greatest poem in English between Chaucer, around 1400, let's say, and Spenser, maybe 1570. So a century and a half, this is the thing that stands out. This is the so-called Induction to the Mirror for Magistrates, 1563. And it's a description of what many of us are seeing right now, I know in the Midwest and elsewhere, winter. The wrathful winter, approaching on a pace, with blustering blasts had all y-bared the treen, and old Saturnus, with his frosty face, with chilling cold, had pierced the tender green. The mantles rent, wherein in rapid bin the gladsome groves that now lay overthrown, the tappets torn, and every bloom down blown. The soil that erst so seemly was to seen was all despoiled of her beauty's hue, and suit fresh flowers wherewith the summer's queen had clad the earth, now Boreas's blasts down blew, the north wind, and small fowls flocking in their song did rue the winter's wrath, wherein each thing defaced in woeful wise bewailed the summer past. Hawthorne had lost his motley livery, and naked twigs were shivering all for cold, and dropping down the tears abundantly. Each thing, methought, was weeping, I me told, the cruel season, bidding me withhold myself within, for I was gotten out into the fields, whereas I walked about. And then, what does he see? Sorrowing I to see the summer flowers, the lively green, the lusty leaves forlorn, the sturdy trees so shattered with showers, the fields so fade that flourished so beforn, it taught me well all earthly things be born to die the death, for not long time may last. The summer's beauty yields to winter's blast. Then looking upward to the heavens' leams, rays, with night's stars thick powdered everywhere, which erst so glistened with the golden streams that cheerful Phoebus spread down from his sphere, beholding dark oppressing day so near, the sudden sight reduced to my mind the sundry changes that in earth we find. That musing on this worldly wealth in thought, which comes and goes more faster than we see the flickering flame that with the fire is wrought, my busy mind presented unto me such fall of peers as in this realm had be, that oft I wished some would their woes describe, to warn the rest whom fortune left alive. That's a sampling from the beginning of the Mirror for Magistrates, or the induction, right? The introduction, I guess we would say, to the Mirror for Magistrates, 1563, by Sir Thomas Sackville, who ended his career as a member of the Royal Council, right? The group around Queen Elizabeth I. And I think that evocation of winter might be poignant, compelling to people that are now going through this. So the idea is then, this is the introduction, and he meets the goddess Sorrow, and from there she takes him on a trip to see people like revenge and misery and care and dread and all these things. And the idea of it is to remind, right, to admonish the people who have political power, right? Henry, Duke of Buckingham, not happy, many others, right? So the idea is, be careful, take it slow, be prudent, be cautious, and you can avoid it. Then the rest is composed of all kinds of pieces that were contributed by all kinds of various people. So, if you look again at that Scrooge movie, you'll see that the human condition is one of needs. We are creatures of needs. We are finite in time. And the the notion of charity, right? This is agape. This is not lust. This is Christian charity. And it's the idea of sharing the human condition, and therefore the obligation and indeed the utility of caring about the needs of other human beings, right? The 7 things that you're asked to do in Christianity: feed the hungry, clothe the naked, give drink to the thirsty, house the homeless, visit the sick, visit prisoners,